This week on our free segment here on YouTube, join us as we take a look at President Trump's pressure that he's placing on the Federal Reserve and what that could mean for the end of Chair Powell's term. For now, sit back, relax, and join us as we take you through the numbers. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, Lyndsay.
How are you?
I'm great. How about you?
I'm great. Just coming off of a very lovely spring weather and holiday weekend, all combined into two. The first one is, the headline is, Trump says he's eager for Fed Chair Jerome Powell's termination. And termination is in quotes. President Donald Trump on Thursday sharply criticized Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, urging the central bank to lower interest rates and saying Powell's termination cannot come soon enough. But it was not clear whether Trump's comments indicated a desire to remove Powell from his position or an eagerness for the completion of Powell's term as Fed chair. The remarks came a day after Powell voiced alarm about Trump's tariff policy, saying it would likely hike inflation and slow economic growth. Powell indicated that the Fed may approach interest rates with restraint as policymakers observe the economic effects of Trump's tariffs. So back on topic with the Fed. And
as always.
I feel like we took a nice little break.
We did.
When is our next Fed meeting that we should be looking for?
So I'll get the exact date, but then market expects the next cut just to be priced in the June meeting. So that's really where the watch is. There was some bubbling, some rumbling that we could get a cut sooner, even like an intra-meeting cut, or so between meetings. That's something the Fed really only likes to do in actual emergency situations. So that gives like 2020 vibes, or like 2008, kind of those, unscheduled meetings. So
what's leading to that speculation?
Well, that was tariffs. There was a lot of, if tariffs bring down growth, should the Fed be responsible for cutting interest rates, like essentially use their power to keep growth higher. Now, that doesn't fall really within their dual mandate cleanly, but that's where a lot of this political discussion comes from.
Well, I guess my question there is, if you're comparing it to 2020, which was a global pandemic, a lot of unknown, like an almost absolute halt in the middle of March of 2020 to economic activity. Is it fair to put tariffs in that same boat, or do tariffs, I feel like everything that you've always shared is that tariffs don't have that halting effect.
No, the world will keep turning, right? Yeah. Tariffs skew incentives. They skew maybe pricing. But at the end of the day, tariffs are not going to bring global trade to a standstill.
Yeah.
So, and we didn't see in that kind of early April, right? April 2nd was that announcement of tariffs. They were later rolled back and paused for 90 days, and some were and some weren't. But we didn't see the Fed have a meeting, an unscheduled meeting, make a move. And there was that other approach to say, well, they shouldn't do that because that would make this seem worse than it is, right? That would make this seem like an emergency if it's worthy of that cut to happen on an unscheduled basis. So they didn't. Now, Powell has made some comments that maybe dance along the edge of political. The Fed, just as a reminder, is an independent agency. They're not supposed to play politics, red or blue. But the comments last week did come out as political to some observers.
Has anything like this ever happened before, where a president and a Fed chair just...
So not a Fed chair specifically.
Agree. Okay.
But there is a case, and this is the presiding law, essentially, or interpretation of the law on, can a president fire appointed leaders? And the term here was without cause. So obviously, if Powell murder someone in the hall of the Fed, right, then maybe we have a different story. But just for doing what he sees as the right way to do his job. So for firing without cause, we actually go back to a 1935 Supreme Court case.
Okay.
I know, I told you we're getting deep here. I promise we'll take this light. But there was a unanimous opinion in this case called Humphrey's Executor.
Okay.
And bear with me. I think the story is actually kind of interesting as far as Supreme Court cases go. But there was this Republican congressman, William Humphrey, and he was appointed to the Federal Trade Commission by President Coolidge, and then later reappointed by Herbert Hoover, both of whom are also Republicans.
Okay.
Then FDR comes in. He's a Democrat. And he asked Humphrey to resign, basically because he wanted to put his own guy in at the Federal Trade Commission.
So it wasn't really like a butting of heads or a disagreement. It was just kind of like, I think I have somebody better and I want him in your position.
Well, the New Deal was coming up. So this is going to be a pretty important position for all of those policies that FDR really, really wanted to push. So he wants someone who's pushing his own agenda.
Okay.
So he asked him, will you resign so I can put my guy in? Humphrey says no, and FDR fires him. And that seems to be the end of it. Humphrey actually dies the next year. So I don't know. He wouldn't have had too much longer anyway, but he passes away. And it's the executor of his estate who's settling his affairs that sues for back pay for this unjust firing without cause from FDR. And so it actually goes up to the Supreme Court. And again, it was a unanimous decision.
So they agreed with the executor. They said he should have never been removed. Fired. Therefore, he should have been paid for that at least year to his death.
Yes. Exactly. So it's fascinating to me that, the question was about pay, not about who should be or shouldn't be. But that was how they had standing, right, to take this case. And I'm actually going to read a quote. I know this is your realm, but I pulled a quote from the opinion. They said, for it is quite evident that one who holds his office only during the pleasure of another cannot be depended upon to maintain an attitude of independence against the latter's will. So what they're saying here is if someone could be fired unjustly, well, how are they supposed to do their job independently if that pressure is political from, say, the president?
That makes sense. And so he's out there with this tariff agenda for a multitude of reasons.
Exactly.
And I feel like all these articles lately in the news and the media, it's all harping on what tariffs are doing to the economy.
Exactly.
So Trump's answer, it seems to be, put the pressure on Powell, put the pressure on the Fed to cut interest rates to get a little bit of growth.
The market would like that, so asset prices will perform. Right, that checks a lot of boxes. Now, it doesn't check the inflation box because we talk so much about consumers are sick and tired of inflation. If we cut rates, that tends to be inflationary too. So the reason the argument is not to cut rates, right, is we don't want inflation to just get totally out of control. There are two differing but still valid points that each side is making. And so that's where it comes down a little bit more politically. Are you on the we need to protect inflation side of the camp, or are you on the no, I want higher growth, right? A little bit less restrictive interest rate policy side of the camp. I'm not saying they're right and wrong, but I'm saying there are winners and losers. And those two sides, the Fed is looking a little bit longer term at the impact of higher inflation. What would that do to future growth? Whereas I think Trump's focus is much more near term. So the offsetting time frame, I think, is exacerbating. And then just once you get these personalities and the heads butting, sometimes it runs away.
Right. So, and who thought I'd be saying it'd be cool to watch our clients go through a depression.
We'll remind you said that one day.
But I think it'll be cool to see the work that they put in now pay off during that.
Exactly. This is going to be a shakeup one way or another. So what you can do is use the shakeup to align for depression. I think that's a really great strategy.
Right. And that, as a reminder to folks, we're talking about the depression in the 2030s cycle. We are not seeing what these last two articles have kind of red flagged as a recession.
Nope. This is not that cycle.
All right. Well, those are some big takeaways for today. That's all the time we have for today here on our free segment on YouTube. If you'd like to see this full-length episode, click on the link in the description below to learn more about becoming an Insider Plus member. You'll have access to not only this full-length episode, but all the ones before it and all the ones yet to come. But until next time, bye, Lauren.
Bye, Lyndsay.